tell me, so, you know, we try and talk about a few themes here just because every entrepreneur has his or her own experience. We talked about your founding story, your kind of founder market fit, which, by the way, is a lot like Brian Johnson's from Braintree. When Brian was here, he talked about they were in a services business that caused them to see the need and became a technology. So.
And that's not an easy thing. I mean, we probably got to $4 million in revenue as a consulting business.
Wow.
And probably 15 some odd employees. And we were a great consulting business, but Drew and I knew that business model did not scale. And frankly, it didn't really solve the problem in a grand way like we wanted to. And so the conversion from a services business where, quite honestly, you get addicted to that revenue and the cash flow. And by the way, we bootstrapped the company from '99 until 2005. So we didn't raise money until 6 years into the business. That consulting business made us smarter, I think informed the nature of the product, but it was tough to change. It was tough to become a product company, to tell your customers no. It's not on our roadmap right now, you know.
So talk a little bit about that, because I think one of the harder things to do as an entrepreneur is this idea of product market fit. You know, how do you figure out the right product? Because it's easy in here. You talk about it here, and it seems easy, and I was laughing with some of our guys in our labs group about, you know, you end up in this situation where you're like, oh, but we should do this, and they could do this. And, you know, products, by definition, mushroom. People have lots of opinions.
Yep.
And so figuring out how to really nail the product is as much art as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your all's experience of how did you figure out the right product? How did you figure out what the optimal product was? You know, what were the sort of things that you learned and that would guide you if you did it again?
Yep. Well, here's the cool thing about your question, Pat, is you ask it as if we figured out the ideal product already. It's dynamic, so we haven't. I mean, we have an incredible team today focusing on how do we continue moving toward the ideal product. As long as businesses change, as long as the world of sales changes, we'll never have the ideal product, and I'm really happy because it keeps us on edge.
But the critical mass.
No,
you got the critical mass, people like, I got to own that product.
No, so it starts with, in my opinion, a real burning passion for solving a problem that you can clearly articulate and understanding who specifically has that problem. In our world, that was a salesperson. Okay, the challenge is, of course, you sell to the head of sales or to the head of marketing or the head of sales operations. They may verbalize the problem one way. The people that report up into them, the actual salespeople, would probably verbalize it somewhat differently.
So talk a little bit about that. I mean, talk about the idea of having we have this in some of our businesses, a decision maker and a user that are distinct in figuring out what to build and what the right product is.
Both very important, by the way, because we need contracts to get paid. So decision makers are very critical. Here's what I learned. First of all, I loved selling to sales and marketing people. And so if you love who you're selling to and you've lived in their shoes for a little while, you're going to have some built-in advantages. Okay, so we were able to speak the language of the decision maker, and we were able to not come off as salespeople, but as consultants and practitioners, but as really smart about the problem. Frankly, we educated these folks about a problem that they wouldn't be able to verbalize themselves. So we won the decision makers over, and I think what that gave us was the license to go do discovery with their people. So we went in early days, we called what we did sales asset management. In 2004, 2005, we began calling it sales enablement. And believe me, still to this day, we'll walk into a sales meeting and say, we do sales enablement, and people go, what? So there was an education process. But the smarts that we had, I think, around the space, the ability to anticipate the need because we knew it very well, allowed the decision makers to say these people are credible. Then we would go out and do discovery with the actual feet on the street, the people who are selling, the content creators in an organization. And we could come back with a very tailored to the company type of solution. So we kind of used a consulting selling process to sell a SaaS solution. I always say to this day, our product is, I don't think SAVO is a SaaS company. I don't think there's such a thing as a SaaS company. You don't sell SaaS. You solve a solution to a problem somebody has. SaaS is a distribution model. Okay? That distribution model made sense for us because we sold to sales and marketing people who don't want to hear about capital expenditure. They have operating expense budgets. So we were SaaS before it was cool. To me, you win the heart and the mind of the person, and then you go out and you solve the problem tailored. And we were selling to big organizations. I mean, to this day, IBM, American Express, Citi, JP Chase.
So talk for a minute.
Companies.
Were you replacing something?
Generally, occasionally. Occasionally, and early on, we had to be, because it was a new category. Still to this day, so much evangelistic selling. People aren't sure that you don't just call them up and say, hey, what are you using today for sales enablement?
That's what I want to talk about. I think the evangelical sale tends to be a slower it's a snowball, but people forget the snowball, how small it starts.
Yeah.
And talk about the, establishing a new category, the challenges and opportunities of evangelical sale, and how you guys did that, because it's hard. I mean, it sounds great once you're successful.
Yeah.
But a lot of companies have died along the way, not getting far enough, fast enough to make it work.
I may be a contrarian in this, I don't know. I think if you're out there today, you're starting a company and you're thinking of creating a category, I think you're wasting your time out of the gate. Create customers, okay? Build credibility, validate those customer stories through third parties. Now you can start talking about a category. If you go out and try and evangelize a category before you have real life success in doing what you think you can do, I think you're making a mistake. I think you're going to spend a lot of time and energy. So from 99, when we started as a consulting company, 2003, we ultimately launched our SaaS application. We really didn't start talking about a category until 2005. And part of it was when we went out to raise money, we had to kind of frame this up, and people said, what do you do? What we did early on, do anything you can do to get your first customers. And I can tell you, spend an hour on different ideas there. But when you have that, I recommend strongly doing third-party case study validation of those. We went out and we hired a firm in 2003 or 2004 called Nucleus Research that focused on analyzing and quantifying in an objective manner the ROI that companies got from doing technology initiatives. They did one early on for, I think, AmerisourceBergen, one of our early clients, for ADP. And they had this like 470% ROI payback inside of 3 months. And it was their logo, not ours. And that became an incredible selling asset for us. It got us in the door to any organization. And suddenly we now had a research firm and an analyst firm asking us more about the space because they didn't see that type of ROI a lot. And it was around that time that we said, maybe we ought to go to a briefing for Gartner. Maybe we ought to go start talking about things. But we were way along the curve before we started thinking about creating a category. I just think that there's some buzzwords that we focus on too much as entrepreneurs.
Talk a little bit about selling and where you're not replacing something, which is evangelical by nature. Yeah. Because it's always easier to get somebody to say, see this thing see your flip phone here?
Yeah.
I got a smartphone for you. Let me tell you why I want a smartphone. That's easier because you're spending money on something. When you didn't have that.
Right. So this is a two-edged sword, right? I think, because when you're actually doing the selling and you're trying to win the heart and the commitment and the contract of somebody, you have to make it clear that there's nothing else like you, that there's no one like you, that there's never been, never going to be, and all that great stuff, right? And no one's as tall, charming, and handsome either. So you need to do that. But then because it's an evangelistic sale, guess what? They don't have anything budgeted for it.
Right, exactly.
So you have to find things that they can replace to actually find budgets. So we were in this dance constantly talking about this new space and really empowering sellers, and yeah, you've got a portal, but that doesn't do this, and yeah, you've got an intranet, that doesn't do it, and oh, you bought this little proposal creation tool, yeah, they don't even use that. So we would distance ourselves from them, and then as fast as we distanced ourselves, as soon as we knew that we had something on the line, it was absolutely, let's replace those things. The 10 grand you spend a year, we can replace that. So it is a dance a little bit, and by the way, the dance won't be the same in any two customers for many, many years. So you got to be agile. You got to be a good salesperson.
Be an athlete. Business athlete. There you go. So what year was it that SAVO growth really took off, that the curve shifted in a dramatic way?
I think one of the cool things about SAVO, truthfully, now I haven't seen a lot more companies having been involved in the CEC. SAVO consistently, and I may be off a percent or two, we've been in business for 14 years, almost 14 years. Every single year, we've had at least 30% growth. So this wasn't like, and then, it's been very consistent. And you start compounding the growth percentage.
But I remember when you had won the Momentum Award, and when you and I caught up a couple years later, it was
so I said at least 30%, right? So percentages are good friends. At least 30%. So truthfully, we launched the SaaS product in 2003. And the growth was enormous in those next couple of years, 2003 and 2005, to the point where we were bootstrapping the company. Up until that time, we went out to raise money, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, in 2004, which became a full-time job for me. And by the way, our worst year of growth, 2004, when I was raising money full-time. By raising money, infusing new capital in the business, we built a data center, we rebuilt our entire technology, and the years from 06 to 09 were incredible growth. We started to scale out our sales organization, started to replicate some of the things that I'd been doing early on. And then, what's been fascinating is there's never been like one of these, though. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, we are fans of selling. It's what we do. We help organizations sell better, so we're good at it, I believe. Can always be better. If you're watching out there, SAVO salesperson, you can do better. Always do better. The other thing is, historically, we've had way higher than SaaS industry norm of customer retention. I mean, up until probably 2008 or so, it was 100% retention. And it's always been north of 93, 94, 98%, somewhere in there every year.
Number.
So if you think about it, if you do a good job of selling, and you do a really good job of making your customers successful, okay, we call it customer success, which is I think what you should call it, you start the year prepped for growth. I mean, everything you sell incrementally is going to be growth. So the couple things, when we scaled our technology, the early technology that we built was still built from a consulting mentality, Pat. I call it a mansion by way of room addition. Okay, we had all these consulting clients, and of course we were in the habit of doing everything they asked for. So when this customer said, I need this, we say, absolutely. And when this customer said, oh yeah, that's on our roadmap. And we had this behemoth of a technology which was incredibly innovative but awfully burdensome. In fact, it was like a SaaS application that took 3 months to deploy, kind of defeating the idea of SaaS applications. When we raised money in 2005, Drew and I are always paranoid people. We've always been paranoid people. Again, I think a good trait for entrepreneurs. We decided to put ourselves out of business before someone else did. And so we wanted to build this faster, slicker, easy to implement, and so we rebuilt the entire application, rebranded the product to the name of SAVO, and launched it in that way. And that was mansion by intention. And that was great because now we had a powerful enterprise caliber software tool that could be deployed within hours.
Talk about scaling the other parts of your organization. How did when you guys started to grow in people, how did that change what you needed to do as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and what'd you learn and what worked?
Well, first of all, I would say the journey of scaling your organization as a founder is a very personal journey. I can't express that enough. You go from being the founder, the everything, Drew and I picking up phones, getting water for everybody, I mean everything, to suddenly, I didn't want to be a CEO. I didn't start out this thing to be a CEO. Suddenly you're a CEO of a corporation. And now you're being looked at as a CEO, and I'm getting a little higher heels, so I looked a little taller and played the part a little bit and painted some gray hair on, which is now very natural. But I absolutely had no desire to be a CEO. That wasn't my goal. So the scaling of the organization as an entrepreneur, I would just tell you, it's a wonderful journey, but it's a scary one. You have to continue to redefine yourself like every single day. And that in and of itself is wonderful. On that front, and I'll come to the scaling of the company, I found some counsel. I joined something at the time, it was called Vistage. I found other CEOs that I could collaborate with. You are all so blessed that you have 1871, okay, and a resource here that wasn't here when I was kind of growing this company. And learned from other CEOs how to be a good CEO, and took some challenges and one-on-one counseling, and people who weren't afraid to tell me I was full of it. And that's a great, refining tool for CEOs. So scaling of myself was a whole journey, and of Drew. The scaling of the company, I would say, at the end of the day, it really comes down to what your philosophy is on hiring, okay? Because, when you start out a company, you're so passionate, you better be passionate. Everything you're doing, you're bleeding it, and then you got to bring in an employee, right? And that's a scary endeavor. I mean, I remember the first employee we had. I mean, this person was a third of the company. How do you screen for those people? How do you really understand if they can function in an entrepreneurial environment? So take your time, hire slow, fire fast. You're going to make mistakes, but then find people who are great in your organization of identifying and recruiting great talent. I mean, to this day, SAVO wouldn't be close to where it is today if it weren't for some of the very early hires we made in the early 2000s. And so you gotta do it wisely, and you're going to make mistakes, and that's part of scaling yourself.
Yeah, it makes sense. We talk about it. You get to a certain point. We did an interview with one of our key people in Max today, and both came back from here. She said, "No, this isn't the right. This person wouldn't fit here." And when you get to that level of people understand what that means,
yep.
I think it allows you to not have to be the entrepreneur, chief bottle washer, everything else. People.
Yeah. I'll give you one little point of advice. Again, I'm a little bit of a contrarian to some of the typical entrepreneurial axioms, like it's all about culture. I don't think it's all about culture. I think at some point your company will scale that you don't create the culture, you enable it. You sort of set the tone for it, right? And I would say if doing it all over again, the one thing I think we did really well, we didn't do it perfectly, but we did it really well, we were able to identify people who actually treated our company as if it were their own. Because inevitably, when you're in a small company, people are put in positions that are probably way above where they should be at that age. But you know what? When they treat the company like it's their own, they watch the money that's spent, they look out for the customers as if they were their own, and of course you share the company with them, it creates a culture in and of itself. And I think it's a little bit too ambitious for CEOs to think I'm constantly going to be in control of this culture. You're not, and that's half the fun. Hire people who are smarter than you, who can take your vision and make it bigger, okay, and who you enjoy being around and who enjoy your customers.